In this video, I want to talk about a book that I recently finished, and that is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This is a fantasy novel for young readers. I'm not sure if I should say middle grade or a young adult, but I did find it in the junior fiction category in the library. It is about a young girl who gets cursed by a witch to look like an old lady, and she finds her way to the castle of a wizard named Howl, hoping that he'll help her break it. That's an extremely brief overview of what the book is about. The reason is that I think you might already be familiar with the story because of the famous Studio Ghibli adaptation. I wanted to bring it up briefly because it is the reason that I picked up this book now. I watched it a few years ago, and of course I was enchanted by it, the aesthetic, and I fell in love with Howl like everyone else. But I found the second half, or maybe the last third, to be a little bit confusing, and I thought that they might have changed stuff to make it like that, because movies usually do that, right? They cut out things to make it fit the length. And the same thing happened when I watched A Silent Voice, and reading the manga really helped. So when I found out that my library had this book, I decided to read it because I thought I would understand the plot a lot better. And I did. There are actually entire characters who are missing from the movie, and even Sophie and Howl have really interesting backstories that I really enjoyed. So let's get into the review now. I'm going to talk about some things that I really liked in the book, and then a couple of things that I didn't particularly enjoy, and it's all going to be spoiler free so that you can decide if you want to read it. So firstly, I really enjoyed the character development in this book. I loved Act 1 because it spends its time setting up Sophie's life, her entire character, her background, her family, her skills, her personality, and I really enjoyed it because I have to relate to her a bit. Plus, it established her motivation for the decisions that she makes throughout the book, because she didn't just randomly wander into Howl's castle one day, right? She kind of did, but you understand why because of the background that we get in Act 1. And similarly for Howl, we learn a lot about him gradually as Sophie learns more and more about him, and I found his backstory to be quite amusing. My copy of the book actually has an interview with the author at the back, and in it she said that she believes that it is our flaws that make us unique and make our personalities distinctive. And you can really see her lean into that in her characters. I think she has done a really great job of making her characters flawed yet likable. And apart from the flaws, I really like that all of these characters had their own interests and their skills. Like Sophie has her sewing and cleaning, and she does it all the time. She does it when she's stressed or when she's angry, and also because that's her job. So I really enjoyed that because it makes the characters feel more human. They do these things that they're good at or interested in, not just to serve the plot, but also because that's what people do. And I'm mentioning this because I don't think that all books do this so well. For example, I DNF'd What If It's Us a couple of years ago, and in that I found the main character's best friend's obsession with coffee shops to be a little bit forced and random. So that's just me. Maybe you found it perfectly natural. I thought it was really good here. So when all of these characters have their own thing, it makes for a really interesting dynamic between them during the scenes where stuff is going on, and they make a good team. Another thing that I really enjoyed is the dynamic that the characters have. Howl and Sophie have a banter that I really enjoyed. They're always making fun of each other in this really exaggerated way that I found funny. And I feel like the fact that they're such flawed characters really lends itself to that. And related to that is how the book portrays so many different moods and emotions. It's not just adventure and excitement. You also feel things like guilt and embarrassment. And in the beginning of the book, there's a point where Sophie feels like she's in a rut, and even that is portrayed so well. Like, not just this fact, but really the mood. And the last thing that I loved is the moving castle as the setting. It has this really cozy vibe to it. The found family kind of dynamic that the characters have inside is also so fun to read about. And having watched the movie beforehand really helped, because I was able to visualize it in the same aesthetic, and it's this messy, mysterious, enchanted kind of house, and it's really fun to read about. In fact, I loved it so much that I didn't even enjoy most of the scenes that happen outside the house. And that brings me to some of the things that I didn't love so much about the book. The first one is this slump that I experienced right around the middle of the book, where they're going on some kind of mission that wasn't holding my interest and I was getting bored. I didn't even pick up the book for a whole day, but I have a friend who has already read it and she told me to push through because it gets better. Second is the complicated, borderline confusing, big picture plot that is going on with Howl. Everything comes together at the end. There are small elements peppered throughout the book. It's not like this big thing starts happening only at the beginning of Act 3. There is like preparation for it from the beginning, and so it comes together at the end in a really interesting and satisfying way. But it's hard to get through it. Like, Act 3 was hard to read because there was a point near the climax where there was just too many characters, too much stuff happening, and it was hard to follow what was going on. This book is written in a sort of a nonsensical, ridiculous kind of way, which I found humorous most of the time. It's just that when action was happening, I just couldn't follow what was going on. There were parts where I was just reading it to get to the end, but the end was really satisfying, so it was worth it. So overall, I'm really glad I read this book. The movie makes so much more sense to me now, but even as a book by itself, I think it's a great book with well-developed, flawed, yet lovable characters with a really interesting and funny dynamic between them. I personally didn't find the external kind of plot with the villain and all that engaging. I didn't really understand what the villain's motivation was. Maybe I shouldn't think that deeply about a children's book, because these things probably just add like fun and drama and some kind of elaborate plot, which I get. It's just not my preference. So I would probably rate it between 3 and 4 stars. Let's call it 3.5. And I highly recommend the book to fans of the movie, but also as a book to anyone who enjoys a humorous book with well-developed characters. I do feel that the movie tells us a story with character types and themes that we're already familiar with. It's just the setting and like the magic that is unique. But the book, I feel, is unique in both senses. Even the characters and their arcs are quite unique, something I haven't seen that much in books. So this is the first book in a trilogy, and I was really excited to check out the next 2 books, but then I found out that Howl and Sophie are not the main characters of those books, and I don't want to have to get through 2 more elaborate / confusing plots just to find out what happens to Howl and Sophie after this book. So I went and read spoilers for both of them, and I am satisfied. If you have read those books, you should definitely tell me what you felt about them. I think rewatching the movie now is going to be really fun, because I will know where all the images come from, because even the small moments of magic in the movie have background information in the book. So I think it's going to be really fun to watch it on screen with the Miyazaki aesthetic and music and voice acting and all that. So I'm really excited.